Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Annie Koloko and welcome to our live. This live actually is about immigration. I am an immigration lawyer. We're going to start talking about what's going on here, talking about immigration news, obviously. If you are interested, definitely you want to join, you want to share the live and you want to go from there, you definitely need to do that. Now, one thing that we're going to talk about today is basically the arrests that have been occurring in immigration court. How do you even get, how do you protect yourself against that? This is something that's actually been a huge issue because until recently, all lawyers who have told you that if you are in removal proceedings, as long as you have a defense, obviously against, if you have a defense, you present yourself. The thing that you don't want to do is actually not to present yourself, not to show up because you are scared. But now we see that things are changing, right? Things are changing. And obviously we have a lot of arrests. And of course, the government is, obviously defending their tactic. The line is, oh, okay, this is actually targeting people who have been obviously committing crime, but it's a little bit more nuanced than that. But at the end of the day, what do you need to know? And how do you protect yourself against it, right? This is basically something you want to know about and to go from there. But it's nationwide. It started to go on, I think, around May 21st or something, but it's everywhere. Meaning that now, if you go to court, this is what it may happen that you go to court, you may see actually ICE agent, and it seems like they've been coordinating with actually the court official, meaning the court clerk, about obviously certain cases appearing before the immigration judges. This has been a huge concern because obviously the last thing we want is for people to feel that they are not secure, because you have to remember that despite all of that, we have to remember there is something that is called due process. And this is something that nobody is talking about. Well, in some quarters, right? They're not talking about due process. But the reason, how do you explain that people actually find themselves in being arrested? There are several things that are happening because obviously they cannot change the law, right? It's just that it has to be, the way the government is actually applying the law is quite interesting because number one, what they're doing in certain instances is actually to terminate cases. Yep. They terminate cases, and once they terminate cases, they don't have to provide any justification. They could just say, okay, just because we decided that we want to terminate the case. The government has that power to terminate the case because the government is the one who brought the case in the first place, meaning that they can, of course, if you find yourself in that situation, you need to be mindful because this is not happening just like that. It's not just, oh, okay, it's just, no. You may think before, previous year, you will have thought that, okay, this is a good thing. This is actually a great news for you because everybody, once you are in removal proceedings, you want to be out of removal proceedings. But this is not what's happening here. Nope. This is not what's happening here. Now, what's going on is most of the time when the case was terminated, it was actually based on the counsel, the defense counsel request, meaning basically somebody, for example, got married, maybe they had an asylum case pending. Now the I-130 has been approved. Then the counsel for the client, meaning the defense, move to terminate the case. Then present the request, whether it's orally or in writing, to the judge. And the judge will just run it right there and there with the government counsel and ask and say, okay, do you have any objection to this? The government counsel, it depends on the administration. Most of the time they will say, no, but we want to have more information about this and this and that and this and that, right? Or sometimes they will just say, okay, just send me an email. And then the case will be terminated, right? Or the cases or the instances where you have is where the case has what is called admin clause. Admin clause, do not confuse admin clause with terminated. A case that is terminated, it's done. You're not under the jurisdiction of the court. Meaning, for example, if you marry your U.S. citizen spouse, then you can go and adjust your status. And this is what you want. This is the reason why the termination of these cases can really create a lot of confusion, right? Because when you hear that, you'll be like, oh, great, I'm not in removal proceedings anymore. I can move forward and this and that. Not so fast. Now, let's go back a little bit about what is admin clause. When you have a case and they say that the case is admin closed, is here they're talking about administratively closed, it means that it's taken off the docket. It is not completely closed, where you don't have to appear before the court ever. You don't have to, the court doesn't have jurisdiction on you, meaning in order for you to go back to court, they will need to issue another notice to appear. That way you appear. No, for admin close, it can be brought by either party. The government can move forward and say, we want the case to be admin closed. Sometimes it's because we're waiting for the case to be solved with USCIS. We're waiting for application to be processed. That could be a reason where the government may be, we don't want to terminate the case yet, but let's admin close for the moment, taking from the active docket, right? Perfect. Hello. We just make that imagine, right? Everybody wants that. But the thing with the admin close, and we have seen that now happening also, be aware, if some of you have cases that were admin closed, it means that either party can reopen the case. I've been receiving paperwork of cases that were admin closed. I will say the last one, I think that I received at the office, it was closed, like the last paperwork that I received today, right? This is for a case that was closed 10 years ago. They're reopening all cases that were admin closed. And how do I know that? Because I receive a letter, copy to the court, of course. We have a motion by the government saying that they need to reopen. They're not saying why they want to reopen. They just say that for the administration of justice, they need to reopen. Mind you, that was 10 years ago. I don't even know where the client is. Okay, 10 years ago. Okay, now this person is sitting somewhere in another state and their case is reopened. Now I have to find a way. I don't even know. I'm just going to write and use the phone number and see if the person is still around, right? But they're doing that because this is actually the policy that the government is pursuing and saying, okay, we need to reopen these cases. That's why when people go to court, going back to cases that are terminated, then they say it's terminated. In the current context, people are extremely happy because they're thinking, wow, the last thing I want is to deal with this current, chief counsel office administration in court, right? No, it's not actually the way it goes. Once they do that, is because once you do that, you find yourself vulnerable to deportation, and you may be facing what is called expedited removal. You see how that goes? They started a case against you, but actually the law allowed them to actually terminate the case, and then you may find yourself in there. And that's for some of you who came to the United States. Obviously, if you came to the United States through parole, right? You came through the border and then you were paroled in because you have an humanitarian request, you were seeking asylum. This is what it is. If you have that, and the government actually, if you find yourself, the case has been terminated, and then actually, of course, now, and even if you've been in the country if you cannot demonstrate that you've been in the country physically for 2 years, it's going to be very hard for you, right? And that's basically what we have been seeing. Meaning that people found themselves, and the government would be like, okay, we're moving to terminate the case, Your Honor. The judge will be asking, okay, what down the ground? What's the reason? But the judge cannot really do much, right? Their hands are tied because the government is the one bringing the case. The government can actually close the case. Period, no question asked. When they say that, they're like, yeah, judge, because the circumstances have changed, or something like really vague reason, right? And then obviously after that, boom, done. Now, once it's done, you step out, then you have the ICE officer waiting for you, and then they arrest you on the spot. How do they know that your case will be closed? Because there is a coordination, obviously, within the government, right? Meaning the government probably have a list like, okay, the assistant chief counsel who has the case that day know that, okay, we're going to close this case. And then you have the ICE, officer just waiting, right? And then the next thing that you have, then is the detention, obviously, and then it will be moving toward deportation, because what they want to do is to say that you fall under expedited removal. Yeah. They want to say you fall under expedited removal. Now, how do you protect yourself against that? If you know you've been in the country for more than 2 years, you need to have proof of that. When you go to court now, you need to have documentation showing, obviously that you've been in the country physically, continuously in the country for at least 2 years. That's very important. But even that is not enough. You need to show also that obviously, if you have been in the country, but that you're afraid to return, you need to say that even before the judge render the decision. And this is where you will be advised to get a lawyer, because seriously, with these times, those times are really dire. Like for you to appear in court without a lawyer is going to be so difficult because you're not familiar. Of course, that's not your job, right? But basically, if you have that, if you know you don't have a lawyer, then obviously, I can see that. I can see that, BTS. But obviously, if you have that, then you have to make sure that, oh, okay, I need to get a lawyer. You need to tell the judge that you want to see the motion in writing. You need to tell the judge that you want time to reply to the motion, that you need at least 10 days. That will allow you to find a lawyer. That's very, very important for you to know that, right? You just don't want to sit down, stay there, and when the government is moving to close the case, you're so shocked, under the shock, that you say nothing. You need to move to tell the judge that, no, time up, time out, time out. I need time, Your Honor. And they will grant time, right? They will grant time. That's not a problem. Now, does that mean that it's over? No, because of course you're going to have to come back. You're going to have a deadline. For example, if you ask for 10 days, that's going to happen. That will happen. You're going to have to answer. Now, let's say that, okay, unfortunately, you are not lucky. You got arrested. If you got arrested, the first thing that you need to do is to make sure that, number one, hopefully you told your family that you were going to court. You share your location. Yes, very, very important. For those of you who are family members who may find themselves in, obviously in detention, look online, go on Google, right? Enter ICE, detainee locator. Just make sure that you're going to be able to locate your family member or your friend, right? Very important. But if you find yourself in detention, it's super, super important that you tell the officer that you're afraid to return to your country, if that is the case. Because you may be removed within a few hours. You need to say that. You need to say, I'm afraid. And the reason is because if you say, I'm afraid to return to my country, I'm afraid that we may be facing torture, and I'm asking for a fair interview. You need to say those three things. Yes. Now, once you say those three things, then what's going to happen? The government has an obligation to give you what is called a credible fear interview. And I know you already went through the asylum process. You were already before the court. For those of you here, I'm talking about people who have particular asylum case. You need to say such thing, because those are the people who may find themselves deported so quickly, right? You need to reiterate and say, you know what? I'm afraid to return to my country. I'm afraid that I will be persecuted or tortured, and I want a fair interview. And then they're going to have to give it to you. And then you better make sure you get a lawyer, because it's not a joke. Things going to be, you now in the big league, and it go very fast, right? Be careful, be careful, be careful. Thank you so much, Serge. Then, of course, once you have that, what's going to happen? You also have to think, for some of you, you may find yourself in detention, even though you're not seeking asylum. Maybe you are seeking adjustment of status, maybe based on marriage, or maybe your child is filing for you, or maybe on humanitarian, for example, VAWA, or maybe you have a waiver going on, or maybe you have a cancellation of removal. Hello, hello, hello. If you find yourself there, of course, you're not going to be claiming that you're afraid to return to your country. Oh, thank you. Like, you return, you're not going to say that, oh, I'm afraid to return to my country just for the sake of it, because you have to be truthful. In some of you guys, in some of your cases, you cannot say that. This is why it's super important. For example, people who are considered, people who actually are not, obviously, if you, for example, if you're part of a category that is on the visa bulletin, right? You're not considered an immediate relative. It's going to be a little bit more dicey when we're talking about adjustment of status based on relationship. But if you're part of, an immediate relative, for example, your spouse is a U.S. citizen, your parent is a U.S. citizen, and you're under the age of 21. Yes, or either you are the parent of a U.S. citizen who is over the age of 21, then you need to, hopefully, you have the proof or the receipt notice showing that there is an application that is actually pending. Because now the next thing, once you get into if you find yourself in detention, if you have that, even if you don't have it with you, you need to make sure that you have it somewhere where your family can access it. But you should, if you go to court, you need to have this particular folder with everything to prepare you in case of a detention. In case you have to prove you've been there for more than 2 years for some of you, you have to make sure you do that. Okay, meaning that you have to do. And for those of you, and I see some of you have clear question, I'm glad to see that. But let's make sure that, of course, you guys listen to the moderator are telling you things. Make sure that you listen, and that way we can actually support the live. But make sure that you have all of that, right? Because the problem is, once you're in detention, it's very difficult and complicated to communicate, right? Now, but like I say, if you have a lawyer, because you need to make sure that you have a lawyer. This is not the time, because once you have the lawyer will be actually submitting, obviously what is called a G28, right? And that's the representation form that is used, within USCIS, within government, where the lawyer is signing this form by saying that they represent you. Okay, meaning that you need to make sure that you have that. Right? Once the lawyer has that, they just contact your DO. If you find yourself in detention, once your family call you, because you as the family, make sure not only you locate your family member, number two, make sure that you put some money for them to be able to call. Yes, it costs, I don't know, it's quite prohibitive, but put money there, because it's all about, you need to have access to funds. And that way, when you contact, you need to know your family member who is in detention, or if you're in detention, you should be able to say who is your DO, your deportation officer. It's super important, because your lawyer will have to communicate with this person, because we're talking about expedited removal. We need to stop the machine. We need to say, okay, no, this is not possible. My client have this, is eligible for that. This is what has been filed, da, right? Now, some of you already have a final removal order. Can you be protected against, expedited removal? It depends. For example, if you be like, oh no, actually, I don't feel like it, because I feel that if I even have to return, I will be facing persecution. If you are afraid in any way, shape, or form, you have the right to file. Now, does that mean that when you apply for something, when you're asking for the credible fear interview, does that mean that you'll be successful? No, but it means that you have your right. You need to know your right. You have the right to say, okay, I want to have this credible fear interview. They're going to be like, yeah, but what? No, but that's not the point. They need to allow you to pursue those rights. Okay, but that's why all of this is going to be much easier, obviously, if you have a lawyer. Like I'm telling you, because you're going to be traumatized. And for those of you who have been here for a long time, it's super important, right? Because you have more ties, right? And if you have a way for you to adjust your status, because that's the thing, some of you are immediate relative. Yes, your application is still pending before USCIS, but guess what? It's going through the system. It takes a while, but then you can move forward and be like, okay, you know what? At least I have that to defend myself, right? But again, do you have the copy with you, or your family has the copy? Do you have children here? Do you have the birth certificate of your kid? All of this to show your tie to the community. Do you work? Do you have letter from your employers? I know some people may not be comfortable with that, but do you have something that proves that you've been employed at this point? Do you have copy of your tax return? Yes, you're going to have to plead your case even before stepping into court, because you need to show, okay, do you even have all of that, right? You need to show, okay, this is what I'm eligible for. This is what has been filed. This is what is pending. Now, some of you, immediate relative, aka spouse of a U.S. citizen, parent of a U.S. citizen who is over the age of 21, or the child of a U.S. citizen, obviously, who is under the age of 21, you may be in the kind like, oh, we haven't filed anything, because that's also very common. People, either because they were not able to do so for various reasons. This is the part where it's complicated when you are in detention, because now you need to sign paperwork, right? And that's what, again, if you have a lawyer, your lawyer could actually prepare that for you. You're going to need to sign paperwork, you need to sign form, this and that is very important. And time is of the essence, because, for example, if you are an immediate relative and then you have nothing that has been filed, right? Let's say, for example, the person applied for asylum, but then in the meanwhile, mid-course, they met someone, they got married. It just happened the person is a US citizen, aka you are an immediate relative. But your case was in court. Then one day the government come and say, boom, the case is terminated. What does that mean? Because until you file something with USCIS, in the eyes of the court, the only defense against deportation that you had was that asylum claim. And now the government is like, we good, terminated, right? This is where it's going to become a problem, because if you are in detention, it's much harder, because now you have to start, or either some of you sometime, they were planning to get married. Now you are in detention. Okay, it doesn't mean that, but you don't have a lot of time. If you're facing expedited removal, you're going against the time. They go so fast. And that for you, you need to have a legal claim. You need to have like a legal defense to say, okay, I am the spouse of a US citizen, or I'm the parent of a US citizen of age 21, whatever defense you have. But let's say those basic one that everybody's familiar with, you'd be like, okay, this is what I'm pursuing. But you need to understand, contrary to what people think, it's not because you're married to a US citizen, for example, that just protects you against deportation. That's not true. That is absolutely not true, because number one, you need to file something with USCIS, and then, okay, ICE will be willing to wait because you are an immediate relative, right? The law is there for you, protecting you. But even that is not absolute, because they will wait, but eventually, because you could file and then USCIS will be like, nope, and they don't approve it, right? But you need to show something. If you have nothing to show, that's going to be hard. And for example, an example that comes to mind, and I think some of you that are following me on several like that is really striking. There was somebody who came to our office. They were married to a US citizen. They went to court, right? Then their spouse, there was something, it didn't go well, right? At the end, the case was actually denied, meaning the client, at the time, nothing, right? Now, by the time they come to us, they needed to appeal the decision of the immigration judge. The problem is, while this is happening, okay, everything is fine, then you appeal, boom. Thank you. Then you appeal before the BIA, the Board of Immigration Appeal. That's a direct appeal. If you are in that state, you'll be like, okay, you go then, because they cannot touch you, right? The thing is, yes, we appeal, and when you appeal, guess what? So contrary to what people are saying, an appeal is not neutral. No. You're going to have to argue why don't you believe the judge made a mistake. You have to argue whether there was a mistake in application of the law, or you have to argue whether there was a mistake, based on the fact. He did not present well. But in the meanwhile, after we filed before the BIA, I told the client that, you know what, this is not really a slam dunk, because whatever was happening there, when I'm looking at the transcript, it was not really glorious, okay? In the meanwhile, the client met his current spouse. They had children, right? What do you think that we did? We had to apply for a new, obviously, application, adjustment of status application, boom, with USCIS. Do you believe this thing took forever to be approved? It was wild. Because sometimes, because of your immigration history, even if you have, for example, a subsequent marriage, you could be facing the government, a lot of scrutiny from the government, looking and be like, we're not sure about this, and specifically when you get married while you are in removal proceedings, there is what they call a presumption of fraud, right? Nothing against you, it's not personal, but this is what the law says. That, oh, is it not convenient that, oh, now you're in removal proceeding, oh, and now you're getting married? How convenient is that? Meaning, keep that in mind. If you find yourself in removal proceedings and then you decide to get married, you will have this presumption of fraud that you can, of course, overcome. That's not a big deal, but you have to be mindful of that, right? Meaning all of this to tell you it took the time that it took. In the meanwhile, the BIA handed the decision based on the first marriage. Remember, we made the appeal. And of course, it was a resounding no. No surprise there, because it was not great what has happened in court the first time. Now, we had to file and tell the BIA, oh, you know what? We have this application based on the second marriage that is pending. Why don't you just reopen? That way we can argue this case again before the court and then eventually close the case, and then the client can have their green card before you. It's very long. Well, let me tell you that while we're doing that, when the BIA rendered a decision, this is where it's very important. You need to know that. Then you become vulnerable to deportation, because even if you file a motion to reopen, it is not a direct appeal. It means they can come and deport you at any time. Meaning that when we file this motion to reopen, show that, okay, the client was married, we filed this and that, and she is married to his US citizen spouse, and we ask for what is called a motion to stay, aka please do not deport my client while you're looking at this motion, because the BIA sometimes takes a long time. But at the same time, we knew that who are the people who can deport the client is ICE, because there is an order of deportation. The BIA already say no, right? Even though you're trying to reopen, on paper, there is this order of deportation, meaning that we have now to file a motion to stay, obviously with ICE. And let me tell you, when you file a motion to stay with ICE, you need to make sure that you have the argument, because if you don't have the right argument, if the fact do not support what you're saying, it's not going to work. And it's also it depends also on the administration, right? We had to file this, and then thankfully, ICE actually granted the stay valid 1 year. The whole time it took for them to approve this I-130 took more than a year. We had to ask for another stay, showing that, yeah, but you see, all of this to tell you that when you have questions like this, when you find yourself being detained, don't despair. Don't think that, okay, I'm going to be deported. Not necessarily. It's going to be unpleasant, but this is why we do this live. You need to be informed, educated, and forearmed. You need to know that. You'll be like, okay, but you need to know, how does the machine work? What are your rights? Because if you don't, you're going to be so overwhelmed by the emotion. Your family also going to be overwhelmed. It's rough over there. You can read, it's very rough. I've been to detention center. It's no joke, okay? But at the end of the day, you need to know, okay, what are my defense against deportation? When can I prove, right? If you know, okay, this is, or either if you decide, you know what, I want to go home. Okay, if you say you want to go home, again, you can just tell your DO and say, okay, I want to go home, but you need to be aware of all the consequences. And also, when you will come, you will arrive before, I start answering question. Don't just sign any document willy-nilly just because you're so overwhelmed, or because you're thinking maybe that's going to help your case, because maybe that person was really nice to you. No, don't do it. Because if you sign, please don't come and say, oh, but by the way, I don't speak English very well. Unfortunately, it is not an argument. No, it's not, because seriously, if you knew that, then you could have asked for an interpreter, and you did not, and you just signed, right? Meaning that don't do it. That's what, again, better have a lawyer, because if you find yourself there, what do you think is happening, right? But don't just sign, right? Because if you sign, even a lawyer cannot remove it. For example, if you sign the paperwork for expedited removal, there is no coming back from that. We cannot, even a lawyer say, yeah, but my client, no, it's done. You signed it, right? It's done, right? Meaning that you just be aware of that. Always remember what are your rights. If you are in court, try to challenge the termination of your case. If the chief counsel office is moving for that, ask the judge that you want to see the motion in writing. You want to see actually the reason. What's changed? What are the circumstances that have changed? Why would they want to close the case now? Right? And ask this for in writing, ask also for the right to reply to that motion, right? In writing, and go and get a lawyer. Now, if on the flip side you find yourself in detention, then of course, like I say, don't sign anything, right? For family member, go online and make sure that you locate your family member, and that way you know exactly where they are. And now is the race. Like he's off to the races, because he's going to be the, like you see how they did with the gentleman Mahmoud Khalil, moving him, whoop, they went down to Louisiana, then he went up. You have to be so on top of it that it's better for you to be ready before it happens. Because it will happen to either you, if you are in a more position, or either somebody that you know, right? You need to be ready. Because one thing that has not changed is actually the rule of law, even though it's been applied very harshly, right? But if you say, for example, I cannot return to my country, I'm afraid, again, make sure that it's true. If that's applicable to you, please don't go and lie, because really, you do that, it's even worse than anything, because you will be completely eligible for any way for you to have a way to adjust your status forever. Meaning you don't want to do that, right? If you know that, again, like I say, okay, if you know, oh, no, okay, maybe I can adjust my status based on, maybe my marriage, or maybe I have a child, or maybe I'm the, try to explain. And all of this is where you need to seek counsel, because you need to, but you better do that now, because it's from the 21st, and we know already, okay, this is going on everywhere, right? Meaning that it's only people who are watching me, for it's other people that will be involved in this, or you will be involved in this. Then get ready, make sure that, okay, you know what, I have all of this. And then if it happens, explore what are you eligible for. Do you have other way to adjust your status, right? Do you have all the proof and the evidence? Because once you're in detention also, even if you're eligible for something, you need to have what is called a bond hearing. A bond hearing is basically like you hear bond hearing, aka you want to be released, right, from detention. Now, a bond hearing is not a joke. It's not that you just like roll in there and then you just say, no, that's not how it goes. You need to be prepared. You need to have your evidence, because the government will come and say that, no, you shouldn't be released. And specifically with the current administration, you have the burden of proof of showing to the government and to the judge that you should be released, and then you will be appearing in court. AKA, do you have a reason to appear in court? For example, somebody who has zero reason, who's at the end of the road, everything is over, they're never going to release you, because they know probably you won't appear. But somebody who has family, but that's the thing, that you have to prepare yourself in advance for things that may never happen. It's like insurance, right? If you have all of that, then you have a better way to prove, right? Of course, what I'm saying, things are changing every day. Meaning the government, maybe they think that they will agree, because sometimes it's a matter of the amount, right? Because a few years back, it was that, like, okay, if you were just coming, you didn't have a lot of ties to the community, then your bond amount requested by the government would be way higher. I've seen cases where the government asks, 20K, 25K, boom, just like that. As opposed to some people who have been here for a long time, less than 10K. You see what I mean? But nowadays, even when you talk about bond hearing, how do you meet? You have to prepare for your bond hearing even before, or maybe if there will ever be a bond hearing, you will ever be in detention. Meaning that you need to know, okay, can I meet the requirement? How am I going to do that? Things like that. Right? But that's basically what I wanted to tell you. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Thank you so much. I see also my people on YouTube. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi, Jack. How are you? Sorry, I have glasses. I need to really, I don't even understand why I can, because I think it's very small, right? And then obviously, some people, again, like I say, people who are seeking the live in French want to ask question in French. Please be aware that the live in French is in the evening. This is not the one. You guys are more than welcome, but this is a live in the English language, as you can probably hear me talking in English. But that's basically it. And I hope that he just shed some light on the process. He shed some light on the fact that you guys need to be aware. You guys need to be prepared, right? Don't put your head in the sand. It's not going away. Okay. Yes, it is being litigated in court because it's completely like everybody. I think now we're tired of saying it's done. It's amazing. It's no. Let's just say okay. We're just litigating this in court. The arrest of people in court are being litigated as being unlawful. Meaning now, but of course, when it goes in front of the court, it takes a little bit longer, for a judge to render a decision, and it shifts all the time because then if the government actually believe that okay they lost on this one, they're going to appeal the injunction, and then it will go again all the way to the Supreme Court. And we have been seen instance where the Supreme Court actually lift the injunction, yes, and then meaning now you have more than a million people, half a million people that are vulnerable to deportation, even though the case has not been actually decided on the merit. But for the moment, the injunction has been lifted. It means that the government can move forward and just try to start to deport people, which is terrible because people have the right actually to pursue their claim. You will see if you read the decision from the court, and you will see that the Justice Jackson, she actually dissented, right? And that's exactly what actually was actually it just make you pause, right? It make you pause. But at the end of the day, it's better to look at what's happening, boom, right, like this. This is a time where we're not going to hide. What's happening? What are your rights? How can you protect against it? What's going on? How does the system work? You need to understand that, right? Once you know that, then you move to the next thing. But that's all, I can tell you. And I'm going to take a few questions. I see somebody's asking, can you take a day? Take a day? We cannot take a day. That's not working. And talk about appeals. What kind of evidence? This is such a vague question. Thank you for the question. What type of evidence on the case depend on the case itself. Depend what type of case is it? What were the arguments that were raised on the immigration court level? Because remember, the appeal is never a new trial, right? The appeal is actually whether you're going to say the immigration judge made a mistake based on the law, right? In the application of the law, the interpretation of the law, or either the interpretation of the fact. For example, when you say the evidence, you don't submit evidence on appeal except if you can demonstrate that the evidence will have not been available in the first place. Why are they doing that? Why do they have these policies? Because they don't want people to just be like, oh, I need to get a second bite at the apple. You did not do your homework in the first place. Now you going through the appeal and you be like, yeah, let me just bring some new evidence. Don't do it, except if those evidence will have not been, it was not available. Then you can submit new evidence. That's what to say. What kind of evidence? I don't know. What type of case? What type of claim? If what type of, is it an asylum case, and so on and so forth. The minutes, it took minutes. Oh yeah, that's something. Yeah, okay, I understand. Oh, okay, love. No, that's a great question. I like that. Yeah, we definitely we can talk about more an appeal. How do you defend? How do you do this? And yeah, we can go into that. That's a great idea. Yeah, guys, don't hesitate. If you guys have idea of things that you want to hear about, yeah, we can get more in detail about that in a different life, of course. And then that could be helpful for some people. But I'm going to start answering a few questions before we end the live. Hello, Gilbert. Oh, thank you, Serge. Cicéron, hello. Oh, that's a great question. That's a great news. Cicéron is informing us that he went to USCIS and he got his green card. Yeah, because in a sea of of bad news, there are some bright, spots, and this is great. I'm so glad to hear that. Okay, the Congo. Oh, oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for you. Okay, you guys on TikTok, let me make sure I do answer a few of your questions. And again, and I know I recognize some name of some of some people will you hear me in French, but yeah, that's not the okay. Jack, VAWA proof court case was recalendar on October. What option do I have? Interesting. But you are in good shape, Jack, if I may say so. Now, the reason also, if your case was recalendar, it means that your case probably was taken off the active docket, right? Because in order to be recalendar, it was taken off the active docket. Now it's back on the docket, right? But if you have your VAWA approved, that was actually your defense. That was your relief from removal, right? Your defense against deportation. You have the approval of VAWA, then you can definitely, ask the judge in open court. If you have a lawyer, is going to do all of that for you, he or she, but just to move to have the case terminated based on the approval of the VAWA. And that way you'll be able to move forward now and apply, when you are eligible, obviously, for, permanent residency. Meaning this is good. VAWA approve you, you're in good shape. But the recalent, it's not you personally. They're just reopening everything, and case can be, even you could have asked for your case to be put back on the docket, to be recalendar, because you need that case to be closed before the court, right? You need to have it closed before the court, meaning this is good. I will not be too stressed. Hello, the revolutionary. Hello, hello. All right. Oh, thank you so much, Caprice. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much, Miss Dukes. Thank you. Greeting, Sarah. Okay, Onzo. Yeah, I talk about Onzo. Thank you for the suggestion. I think the appeal is going to be one of our next team. Talking in one of the upcoming lives. Okay, Onzo said, can GHS ask the judge to dismiss a case based on a motion, and why motion should be granted? That's a great question. Yes, of course. GHS can dismiss a case. That's what they're saying. That's what they call terminated, right? That's the word that they use, terminated, right? Dismiss is more in the criminal, type of proceedings. The charges are dismissed, right? And therefore, that's it. In this case, the government can seek, for the case to be terminated. That's what I was saying, that it creates confusion, because when they do that, normally it's a good news, but nowadays not so much, right? That's of course, and it can based on the motion. The motion can be made orally, right? Yes, Your Honor, we're moving to to have this case closed, and then the judge is like, okay, what will be the reason? Even though, like I said, they will have to grant it, except if you oppose it, right? If you, the defense, be like, no, but except they're not. But now the judge also, they say why the motion should be granted. When it comes from the government, most of the time, really, it could be granted, except if you on the defense make a good case and argument to the court showing that, no, you don't. For example, if there is only way for you to adjust your studies is through the court, because there are some type of relief that you can only have in front of an immigration judge. Then I can imagine as a lawyer, if my client is only eligible for a relief that he can only obtain before the court, I'm not going to agree for the case to be terminated, because if it's terminated, it doesn't solve my client's case, meaning you see how that goes. But now, of course, the judge at the end will decide whether, if you make a good case, if you have obviously you have the argument, you have the evidence. Sometimes the judge may be like, you know what, I want both parties to to submit a motion or to submit brief, right? Contrary to what people think, a brief is everything but brief, but something like that, right? Oh, Fredu Chouchou. Yes, I know it is. Yes, it's in English. Yes. Yeah, no. It's a great question, though. It's a great question, because not sometimes, when you go to court, immigration could. Immigration court, you need, it's like going to a new country, right? You need to learn the language, you need to know what's going on. You specifically need to know what are your rights, right? It's super important, because if you don't, then you may be, and that's why, having a lawyer, again, I keep repeating that, and I'm seriously not preaching for my choir, but literally, it's complicated. And you can see that when you go to court, you will see on the government side, the table will never be empty. They will always have an attorney representing the government. Like, what are you doing? Like, if you do, then obviously, do what you can to protect yourself. Let's say if you go down over there, to the court the first time, right? And again, be careful. I told you, you need now to, really seriously have everything possible in your folder when you go to court. But let's say you go to court, you don't have an attorney, you're not represented. You can ask for the judge to reschedule the case so you can actually hire an attorney. You have the right to do that. But now, again, you have to remember that the government does not owe you, representation. They don't owe you the right for you, like, oh, okay, they're going to assign you a lawyer. No, this is only applicable for criminal cases because it does involve loss of freedom. Immigration law, contrary to what you may think, is actually civil law, right? In civil law, nope. You have the right to an attorney, but you have to pay this attorney. If you look at your notice of hearing, it's written black and white. What does that mean? It means that you go the first time. Okay, I don't have a lawyer. The judge says, okay, fine. We're going to reschedule the case. And hello, Leila. And then, of course, you go the second time. Maybe really you were unlucky. You still don't have a lawyer. Some judge may be, okay, one last time. Third time, if the government does not oppose. Nowadays, I'm thinking the government will probably oppose, but well. Third time, you're coming again. You don't have a lawyer. Now you're going to have to represent yourself. They're going to ask you, okay, what do you plead about this? Because, you have this allegation against you saying that you should be deported based on this and that. What are you saying? And then even when you understand, okay, what is your defense against relief? You need to know a word like this, relief from removal. Because in court, they don't say deportation anymore. That was actually the old law. They say removal. You're being removed, removal proceedings. They're going to say, what is your relief? Are you applying for a type of relief? What they're trying to say is that, are you applying for a defense against deportation? That's what they're trying to tell you. And you need to tell them. And some of you may be like, yeah, I'm the spouse of a US citizen. Okay. Do you have proof that you file anything? The judge will ask you. See? If you don't, then the government will just say that they're moving for you to be deported on the spot. Of course, you have the right to say that, no, you want to have the right to defend yourself, but they will be pushing either for voluntary departure or either if you don't leave, then they enter an order of deportation. But you can still say, you know what? Let me just go to court, even though I haven't have an attorney. Then they will give you a trial date, right? It's called an individual hearing. And on that day, you could even, a few weeks before, you could still find a lawyer, right? Now it depends on who the lawyer is available, and the lawyer will represent you on that day. The court will have no problem, and then you can just, the lawyer will just submit, obviously the E28 showing that they're representing you, and they will appear in court with you, right? But you have to understand that, you can go to court the first time, because some people, sometimes people that are just not sitting there thinking about, oh yeah, I need to hire a lawyer until it happens, right? And then they are in reactive mode. Now they have to move forward. And sometimes the court date is too close and you don't have enough time to find a lawyer. It's fine. The court understands, but you have to understand that there will be a time where at one point they will be like, okay, that's good. Now you need to represent. We've seen instances where they have children, 3 years old. That was wild. Even though, you have pro bono lawyer moving, because once you just, okay, let me just defend that baby, because come on now, what are we doing? But this is as to tell you, the judge will probably push and trying to ask somebody to defend the kid, right? But you have to remember that if you don't have a lawyer, you're going to have to defend yourself. And the government is not going to give you, cut you some slack just because you don't have a lawyer. No. They will just move, again, and because well, they will move against, moving with the allegation they have against you. They will put the case forward, showing why you should be deported. They will show that the fact applies to the law applies to the fact, and then that da 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 da, and then you are deportable, right? You need to understand all of that, but it's possible. That's why if you guys are in this situation, at least I don't want you guys to be completely like, what's going on? What's going on? You at least you understand, but be mindful and move fast, right? Move fast, move fast, move fast, move fast, move fast. But yeah, but thank you so much. Obviously, um, okay. I can see some people here. Obviously, um, then I can see some people asking question. Okay, and then to see if you have additional question before we end the live. Okay, and then just to see that. But thank you so much, guys, to be here. I know it's in the middle. It's just a quick chat. We're not gonna say around the fireplace like like that was former president, right? Like so it's President Roosevelt around the fireplace, little chat at the end of the day, I guess, in the evening, talking to the fellow American. Oh, thank you so much, Amzo. Thank you so much. It's very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Just wanted to tell you that for those of you who speak French, who grace us with their presence, thank you so much for being there. No problem at all. Everybody is welcome. For the people who definitely just want to speak French, of course, as you know, we have a live in the evening. People who speak English that want to come to the live in French, no problem. You can do that. That's not a problem. But yeah, except than that, and I think that everybody, I think we cover a little bit more. We have some stuff, in store for you that we're working on. And then we just keep you posted. If you guys have questions, like Omzo is asking, like, can we talk about appeals? If you guys have other things that you want me to cover, no problem. Just let me know. We're trying to cover things that are in the news because people have questions about that, just to make sure that we avoid confusion, we avoid misinformation, because people, unfortunately, are victim of misinformation, right? We want to make sure, specifically in the immigrant community, there is a lot of misinformation, disinformation ongoing, because people are more comfortable, and that's human, right? That's normal, right? The more comfortable they believe, obviously, facts coming from people who sound like them, people who look like them, right? And unfortunately, in that particular type of situations, some people sometimes they fall victim of unscrupulous, bad actors, meaning that be mindful, be careful. You don't want to, and that's what we're doing that as well, just to make sure that we, of course, you have to be careful. But yeah, I think at this point is information is power. What you should know when you go to court, or your family go to court, or what happened, and so on and so forth. Meaning there is a mix of, okay, what's going on in the news that need to be addressed immediately, and then of course other things that you should know, that we believe that you should know. Of course, that would be great. Okay, but thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much at the YouTube team, the YouTube support. It's always a pleasure to see you guys. Thank you so much for being there. Thank you. I hope to see you tomorrow, of course, midday. Thank you so much at the team on YouTube.